I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and it's been a relief, and it's helped me kind of reflect back on things and made a lot of sense of things for me.
Do you think it's a net positive that you're aware of it, or do you think it's just added more stress into your life by being conscious of the fact of that?
It's a bit stressful just because I'm like very conscious of it and I'm trying to like learn more about it, but
the co-founder of the health and fitness app Kick,
featured in the Forbes 30 Under 30, as well as a proud mother. Today's guest is Steph Claire Smith.
20-year-old Steph, when you did move over to the States, what did that do to you?
So I was a couple of years into my modelling career. The industry has no care for your health. A whole bunch of things were really toxic, and I wasn't happy, and I certainly wasn't energized, and I was certainly feeling like shit when I would rock up at castings. If I didn't have my Australian clients that I was still kind of working with or connected with, that probably would have been the end for me. Like I would have been like...
How was having Harvey a few years ago now and falling into motherhood, and how's it been for you?
It's a dream come true. I always wanted to be a mum. Is it way harder than I anticipated? Yeah, but I think that's just because nothing can really prepare you other than the experience itself. I think it's this pull between two passions for me, which is what I struggle with the most.
Is there advice for people that you give them when they're trying to start out in business as a young woman trying to give something a go?
I think the one thing that holds people back, particularly women, if you look at the stats, is like...
Steph.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
You mentioned a lot of times on a lot of different podcasts that you've always been quite a confident person.
Yes.
Where do you think that comes from?
I think originally the first thing that comes to my mind is my dad. He is very loud, proud of who he is, different, quirky, but I was always around that energy growing up. And even my mum, I mean, she's quieter, a little bit more reserved, but she's also always been really comfortable in just doing things her own way. You know, she can be the person at the party that doesn't drink and, you know, is like happy with that and doesn't care what anyone else thinks about her and, you know, choices and stuff. So I think in her own way, she's really quietly confident as well. So I think growing up with two parents like that, and my brother similarly was very kind of outgoing, sporty, confident. That's just kind of all I knew growing up. But then also a lot of my interests, especially as a kid, being in like drama and singing and dancing and performing, that kind of gets you out of your shell quite a lot, as you can imagine. I also started working early. I was at Baker's Delight from 14. So I think speaking to strangers and like doing all of that sort of stuff from a younger age as well, straight up, just grew my confidence a lot. So yeah, I think that's why I always say I feel like I've always been a bit of a confident person, but it doesn't mean that I don't have confidence in some aspects or areas of my life, because there is definitely times where that confidence is challenged, and I definitely do not feel like my confident self for sure.
Do you think being confident growing up helped you in school?
Yes.
A lot of people have challenging times in school, but for you, how was the schooling experience given that you were kind of a bit more outgoing and confident?
Yeah, for sure. Primary school, a breeze. Had the best time. Like I have so many positive memories from primary school. I think in high school when, you know, there was a little bit more pressure on your kind of academics and what you were going to do in life and all of that sort of stuff, that's where my confidence kind of got affected a little bit. But even still, I think I was so sure on my interests and what brought me joy, and that was important. And I was so fortunate that the one thing my mum always said to us, like my brother and I, when it came to kind of like choosing your direction, your career and everything like that, is that kind of like finding happiness or being happy in what you do, it was the most important thing. We never felt the pressure to get a certain enter score, to get into a certain uni degree, to get a certain job that was impressive to people. Like my parents never spoke about that stuff. So I feel like from home, I was quite comfortable and confident in chasing the dreams that I had. One of those was modelling. But then it was more so at school from like external factors, like what the kids might say about some of those dreams or what the teachers might say, particularly in the classes that I wasn't necessarily doing too well at, that would affect my confidence. I think at the time I didn't notice how much it would. I think I kind of had a bit of a brave face and was like, oh, well, I'll show you. This is like, I'm going to do great things. But I think unfortunately what I didn't realize was happening at the time, and it's something that I've kind of uncovered through my 20s, is this self-belief that I have that I'm not intelligent, that I'm like this dumb person. That definitely was like kind of seeded from high school. And I think at the time I didn't think about it too deeply, but that's definitely where it started and came from, and it's just grown from there. You
said you feel like you had this belief that you weren't intelligent?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like you just didn't think you were very smart at all?
Yep. And I think it's because in the past, the way that we've kind of categorized smart or intelligent people has been the more academic type, you know, people that are good with numbers or those like harder subjects, right? Because I think the worst thing that I reflect back on in high school is how many friends of, well, not friends, peers, I would call them, and even some teachers would say that the subjects that I was choosing were the easy subjects. And I challenge that so much now because I'm just naturally more creative. That's what I'm good at, and it's what I've always gravitated towards. So a lot of my subjects were like studio arts, food tech, and then I was also really sporty, so sports, health, etc. Wanted to drop out of maths and science as soon as I could. History, a little bit of interest, but still dropped out of that when it got serious. And so a lot of people kind of, you know, mark them as the easy subjects. And it's not just them as people, it's the school system. Unless you completely ace those subjects, they get marked down. Whereas the harder subjects, you don't have to do as well, but you'll get marked up because they're found more challenging. So that just instantly tells you that like what you're doing is not as hard or you're not as intelligent as the other person. Well, it's what I believed anyway.
I guess it's interesting with the schooling system and how like those subjects seem to be the hard subjects. Some subjects seem to be, you're doing easy subjects, meaning you're labeled as less intelligent.
Yeah.
But really you're kind of like, especially with having your parents there kind of empowering you to do what you truly wanted to do. It's not really you're doing stuff that's less smart. It's just more letting your curiosity and interest guide you. Like, okay, if you don't want to do science, you're just not going to do science sort of thing. Yeah. But I guess maybe a lot of people, and I think what's really interesting is you were empowered by your parents, which is such a powerful thing because most of the reason people are doing the things they don't want to do is because their parents want them to do that thing.
I know.
And so being able to drop something is a lot easier when your parents are backing you in a sense. Were they always quite supportive with the things that you were trying to do growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was doing part-time modelling as a kid. So even later years in primary school, I'd kind of get taken out for like 2.5 hours to go shoot for Target catalogue and come back with like pigtails and lip gloss and thought I was the coolest kid ever. But they were really supportive from the get-go. And then when it came to high school, I kind of stopped modelling, or at least paid modelling, and I would just kind of be the one to put my hand up if someone needed someone to shoot for studio art. And then towards the end of school, I did like after school, I think it was like called Model Academy or something, because I was like, this is what I want to do. I think I want to have a gap year because I'm so confused as to like, if I do go to TAFE or uni, what subject am I going to do? I love kids. Maybe it'll be a PE teacher, something like that. But I was just so drawn to modelling and really wanted to give it a crack, and they were all for me taking a gap year and doing it. The one thing that mum said is just grab a part-time job at least so you're not like all in on this modelling thing in case you're not making any money, but we'll support you. I was still living at home, and, you know, maybe talk to your friends and stuff over the year, see how they're going with their studies, what direction they went in, and see where your interests are at the end of the year. But I was really fortunate that when I did do that, pretty quickly I picked up some really regular clients. I had to drop my part-time job after 2 months, and just fell in love with it and fell in love with the opportunity. So I took it full-time pretty quickly.
Do you think modelling throughout high school helped your confidence or made it worse?
It helped my confidence, but there's still like, I can still remember certain people telling me like, I would have enough confidence to say, if someone was like, what do you want to do after school? I'd have enough confidence to say, I think I want to try modelling, which already felt like that took a lot. But then people's response would affect how I felt afterwards. So some people would be like, oh, but like surely you're doing something else. Like you can't do just like modelling, or like that's not going to take you anywhere or whatever. And then I'd start to question a little bit. But I think, as I said earlier, I think because I was so set on that as such a strong interest of mine, I like wasn't going to let anyone not let me give it a red hot crack. And I'm not afraid of failure. I think that's something that's been very much a part of me from a really young age. Is I am very much like oh, shit happens, but you pick yourself up and we keep going. And so I think I was very open to the idea that it might not work out, but I've loved this idea for way too long to ignore it. And so I think that it kind of gave me a little bit of fuel to prove people wrong.
That's cool. Do you think, because you mentioned primary school was a breeze, but then high school was a little bit more challenging, what would you say the things that kind of hindered the confidence? What would you say the things that kind of made the confidence less prominent?
Outside of kind of the academic side of things and like feeling the pressure to, I don't know, do subjects that, and again, not from my parents, so I didn't necessarily ever listen to these pressures, but it did hindrance that confidence a little bit, was like, you know, choosing different subjects or really sticking through the really challenging ones to be better and et cetera. I think now with my ADHD diagnosis, I look back and I'm like, I think there's some things that like no matter how hard I tried, I would have just found them really challenging like till the very end, you know, and a lot of people love feeling challenged, and I totally understand. You've got to be uncomfortable to get comfortable in something and to learn and grow. And it's not that I disagree with that, but I think there was just too much that brought me so much joy that I did love to learn more about that was on offer. So I was like, why wouldn't I choose that? I think outside of that stuff, I mean, I was a sucker for attention in school. So like, I really got caught up with boys and all of that sort of stuff. And I think one thing I'm really, really fortunate with is two of my best mates to this day have been my best friends since year 7. And kind of no matter what happened with groups or drama or boys or anything, we've really kind of been there for each other, and they've been a constant in my life. And I wouldn't say we were like the popular kids, but we were really fortunate to kind of have friendships in a few different groups. And I love that. When I reflect back in high school, I love that I kind of had friends from a couple of different groups, but the only thing is you still had that natural like, oh, I just want to be appreciated or like looked at or like, I don't know, talked about by the popular people or like, I don't know what it is. I think lots of kids go through that. So I still felt that, which I think some people might be surprised, especially people who knew me back then, because I was oozing with confidence. I think some people, you know, I've talked to people since high school and they would reflect on me as like one of the popular kids. And for me, it's funny to hear that because there was all these other groups to me that were just like so much more obviously the popular group. I don't know why.
We just get in our heads.
But it affected me. It did, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that like being this outgoing, extroverted sort of person seeking attention growing up, if we fast forward to when you started really growing and blowing up on that social media and gaining this audience and all this attention online, did you find that extroverted nature in you stay there when you're out and about or in social settings, or did it start to fade away a little bit? Or how did that look?
That's a really good question. I think
we will get back to speaking with Steph in just 1 minute, but first I need to tell you about this thing that is on my wrist called a Whoop, the ultimate health and fitness tracker. This thing has been an absolute game changer for me when it comes to achieving my health and fitness goals. As we all know, it is so important to get a good night's sleep, and this is one of my favorite features on Whoop. It is the sleep coach. Whoop tracks my sleep and gives me a score based on how well I've performed, and it also gives me metrics such as how much deep and REM sleep I got, how many times I woke up throughout the night, and all of these metrics contribute to how well recovered I am so I can attack the next day's activities. It's a game changer, especially with my increase in training load for my training for High Rocks next month. It's been great to stay on track to make sure I'm recovered and giving everything I got in all the sessions that I'm doing and just the way I feel, especially for things like these podcasts. If you guys want to try out Whoop, you can go to the link in the description or the show notes below, or go to join.whoop.com/Chris, and they'll send you a band completely free and you'll get 1 month completely free. Once again, go to join.whoop.com/Chris to get 1 month completely free, and they'll send you a band completely free. Let's get back to the episode with Steph Claire Smith.
I've been growing my following since 2011. I think it was by 2013. I think I had 400,000 followers. So it's been a long journey of having quite a few eyes on me. But it did take some getting used to. Like I remember when I first started getting noticed or recognized out in public, like that was, I mean, it still is. It's quite exhilarating and like It's wild, particularly when you're overseas and it happens, or like someone from overseas knows who you are. I still find that wild even now. But I think with like events and stuff like that, definitely over the years, the excitement of going to things like that has lowered a little bit. But I think that's like anything, when you experience it more and more, it's less exciting now. But I think the people who are there really matters. If you put me in front of a crowd of like KIC community members, which is our business for anyone listening, I'm like so confident and I feel so empowered and so supported, and I'm like there to give them every ounce of my energy and attention, and I have the best time ever. Do I leave feeling absolutely exhausted? Absolutely. But it's a very, very different feeling to like, I don't know, going to a brand activation or something else where I'm kind of met with a lot of other people and having to socialize. I think also for me, what's been really interesting is navigating the more, I suppose, business-centric kind of like events or panels that I've been a part of or whatever. I find them probably more mentally exhausting, just because I feel a little bit more out of place there, which is weird as someone who's kind of almost run a business for 10 years now. But I don't know, it's still something that I kind of grapple with in who I feel most comfortable with being my 100% authentic self.
Yeah. I relate to that when you're saying, like, if you're doing it with the KIC community, you'll be lit up.
Yeah.
For me, it's the same. If I do a massive run club or something, I'm center of attention, love it, energy. I'm going to give everyone my fullest. And yes, you feel wrecked after it, but it's something that just gives you such a big kick and excited. No pun intended with the words. But what I was more so curious to know is, because this is more of probably a selfish question, is the more I've grown in status, the less I've been outgoing, energetic, meeting new people.
Right.
And it's been an interesting thing where you kind of grow, and I feel like I'm getting my social kick because there's so much happening online, and you're getting all this praise, you're responding to people and all of this sort of stuff. And then you run into people online and you're kind of still somewhat switched on when you're just going for a walk down to the beach. And I feel like all of that has resulted in me, when I'm introduced to all these new people, I'm not really like this outgoing, bubbly, extroverted person that I used to be a few years ago. And it's just an interesting thing. Have you felt that at all, or has it not been a problem for you?
Is that because you think that maybe with a bit more status, people already have a perception of who you are?
Potentially.
Because I think there's a little bit of that. Like, I can definitely relate to that in parts, but I think I'm really fortunate that the way I've grown my personal brand has been by sharing like almost every inch of my life and of myself and my insecurities and things that I've grown through and gone through. And so I kind of feel like there's not a lot out there, like, that people don't know about me. And so maybe that's helped me with like meeting new people, because I kind of think, well, their perception of me should be pretty on point to who I am, because I'm pretty authentic online. But then at the same time, like, do I have off days where I know I'm like not going to be probably the brightest or most energetic person that maybe they're expecting? Like, absolutely. And does that make me feel bad and conscious of that? Absolutely. I don't really know if that
I'm
goes,
not referring
but I think
to
you
people
just
that know you online, or at least like, say someone stops you on the street, not those encounters, more so encounters of like
other people with status.
No, not other people with status. Like, you're just going to a friend dinner and they have 10 other mutual friends there or whatever. And I used to just love to have this thing where I kind of, but now I don't. And it's just an interesting thing. I was just fascinated to know, more selfishly. But I don't know. I'm still trying to navigate it, but it was just a fascinating thing that I've noticed really. The more the status has grown, I've kind of, in a social setting, gone to more of an introverted nature as opposed to an extroverted nature. Yeah. Unless it's my own event. If it's my own event, then I'm everything. But
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate to that. I think I would have used to have kind of described myself as an extroverted person. But the older I've gotten, and I suppose the more experiences I've had, I think I actually am much more introverted, unless I'm with my most comfortable people, my crew, you know?
Yeah. So and I think that's tying into that as well. What I've also found is that the more you grow in status, there's like a little bit more of a wall that comes up. And the only reason comes up is because you get so much abundance of opportunities and people wanting things and all of this that your circle gets tighter, so it gets smaller and stronger. Yeah. And then so probably when you're around that circle, you're your normal self, energetic and exciting. Yeah. But potentially when it's outside of that, it might take a little bit harder.
Yeah. I tend to be the person who always thinks like the best of someone, or like they've got the best intentions, or if someone's not, like they're just going through something or whatever. There's definitely been points in my career where I've had close friends of mine kind of identify some people who, you know, maybe have had different intentions and rather than just being my friend, that I have been so blindsided to and naive, I suppose, about. So there's definitely a little bit of that, and maybe like the more that's happened over the years, the more I'm like guarded in some way. But I don't know. I still always look for the best in people.
I like that approach. It's cool. I think it's a way more positive approach because it stops you from even like questioning things and bottling up all these different thoughts that are not positive in your mind.
Like, are they only complimenting me because I don't know?
Yeah,
they want something out of me.
It's cool. We'll talk a lot more about business as well and kick, and I really want to talk about this progression from transferring out. And I know you didn't just drop your modeling and go into business. You kind of were doing them both in parallel. Yeah. But before we talk about that, I'd love to go back to 20-year-old Steph when you did move over to the States. What did that do to you? Like mindset-wise, what did that expose you to? How did that make you feel?
Yeah, so I was a couple of years into my modelling career. I'd had a really positive experience in Australia so far, so I wasn't leaving because I hadn't, you know, grown the clientele that I wanted or that I wasn't busy enough or anything like that. It was more so, okay, this is really exciting to me. It's going really well, but I have my eyes set on some international clients. And I think there was also this thing in Australia, in the industry, I'm sure a lot of people, if they're in it, can relate to this, but especially back then, there was this like almost badge of honor that you wanted to chase to be some international model and like then come back and work with like the top tier brands in Australia and I don't know, just have that recognition. There was a little bit of that for sure.
Still there.
It's still there. And so that was kind of the drive to go over. Also just at the time of my life, like I felt like I was ready to kind of move out of home and try that.
It's exciting.
It was really exciting. And for the most part, it was a really good experience. I was away for probably 10 months all up. There was a client of mine in Australia who would fly me back. I probably ended up coming back every 8 weeks or so for a couple of days just to shoot with them, quickly touch base with friends and family and then go back. So I was lucky I had that. I think I would have been really lost without that. Also financially lost without that because it's expensive to live in the States when you're not working over there. But I think what it did for me is it was incredibly eye-opening to have very, very different relationships with my agencies over there that I do with my agency here. I've had the same agent since I started, which is actually pretty rare. But the loyalty and the relationship there is super important for me. And they're just the best. And I still have that close relationship with them. So I think even though that was only 2 years in, that's all I knew. And so going overseas and experiencing a very different relationship with agents and the way that they spoke to me, like I was kind of just a coat hanger of a kind, was really jarring. But I think that was just because I was really fortunate to have had a really positive and somewhat unique experience in the industry already. Because the more people I talk to, the more I realize that my experience in the US is most people's experience no matter where they are in the world. So I was really lucky. So basically I went over there knowing that the market was going to be different. I went over there knowing I was going to be a very, very small tadpole in like a massive, massive market, and I was going to have to work really hard in like meeting the right people, getting myself out there, going to bazillion castings and getting no's all the time. And I was okay with that and I was still excited about that. But I think when my agent, who in my mind was supposed to be like the most supportive person for me over there, was talking to me about, you know, losing more inches or, you know, not being actually representable of their brand at this time. So we're going to take you offline until you lose more weight and things like that. That was really horrible to go through at the same time, I was so keen to make it work over there. It's like I didn't want to go there and be there for a month and have to come home with nothing, that I fell into the trap of like doing anything to meet what they were asking for, which meant that I fell into being really obsessive over what I was eating, how I was moving my body, and just what my body looked like in general. And as most girls do, I definitely had insecurities growing up, but I was pretty confident in my own skin, and the clients that I worked with in Australia never made me feel like I needed to change. Again, very fortunate that was my experience. So I think, again, very jarring, very hard to go through. I picked up some really unhealthy habits, and lost a lot of my confidence and bubbly nature. Like I couldn't leave the house without getting changed 20 times, just trying to find the thing that looked baggy on me so that I looked somewhat smaller. They were making me go in for measurements twice a week. And even when I got to kind of like the goal measurement that they'd asked for, I wasn't happy, and I certainly wasn't energized. And I was certainly feeling like shit when I would rock up at castings. Like I would rock up at castings with zero confidence. Even though I did what they wanted, I was like not comfortable with who I was. And so that was really hard. And again, if I didn't have my Australian clients that I was still kind of working with or connected with, that probably would have been the end for me. Like I would have been like, this is it. I'm going to have to find something else to do, because I did come to the realization that what I was doing was not going to be sustainable. And yeah, I spoke to my mother agency in Australia about it when I was like hitting my rock bottom there, and they helped me recognize that it didn't necessarily need to be that way, and that obviously I was welcome home anytime. And they made me feel really comfortable about making some changes over there. I switched agencies, but even by the time all of that happened, I think I was just homesick and ready to head back home. But that experience I don't necessarily regret, because it has been the fuel that, you know, started the idea of Kick. Because outside of the modelling industry, the more people I spoke to about what I was going through, the more people I opened up. I was flooded. My DMs were flooded with people being like, I can't believe you as someone that I look up to is going through something like this. I feel so seen. This is what's happening with me. It was almost like every person that followed me had gone through something similar, and it was all related back to being as like small as possible or looking a certain way. And at the time particularly, this is 10 years ago, especially online, the wellness and fitness space was either very much like macro calorie counting, your steamed broccoli, steamed chicken way. And then the other side of it was like this super unattainable, we have to go to a superfood store to make this brownie that's healthy, but it'll probably taste like dirt and beetroot. But there was like nothing in between. And I grew up in a really balanced household. My mum never spoke about diets. She never even spoke about insecurities that she had about her body, which she absolutely had, but she was just obviously conscious about how that might affect me. And I'm eternally grateful for that, because unfortunately it is such a common story that we hear from our community members, is that they grew up seeing their mums go on diet after diet after diet after diet, and their mums weren't models or anything, but that's just like normal, and that's what people think is normal to kind of follow that sort of stuff. So we wanted to find something in the middle, and I knew my friend Laura, who I'd connected with through modelling, she had a food blog at the time sharing the most delicious kind of like whole food ingredient recipes that I myself was cooking when I was living over in New York. And so I met up with her at a cafe one day. It actually had come from a dream, but I was like, I think we need to make an ebook together. And she was like, what the hell? What do you mean? And I was like, I think we need to put like 30 odd of our favorite recipes together, because people are always asking me what I'm cooking. I was really into savory cooking. And I know you've got like the most amazing recipes. Like, I'd love to do this with you. And she was like, who the hell is going to pay for that? And I was like, well, you never know. And I think the confidence in me at that time, and the reason outside of obviously wanting to help people, that I thought like, we've got to give this a crack, is I'd also had other brands that I was working with. You know, at the time, I don't think there was much paid work going on, as in paid influencer work or content creation, but it was just starting, and so many clients kept coming back to me. So I was like, I've obviously got an engaged audience. I want to make sure that with this engaged audience, I'm putting stuff out there that feels really good to me and that I know is helping them in some way. And this could be the way that we could do it. And who cares if it doesn't work out? Like, it's fine. It is what it is. So we actually found two brands to sponsor it, which meant that from the get-go, we weren't out of pocket, and it went so much better than we imagined, even with the 20 spelling mistakes in it. And the slimy banana bread that was 3 days old by the time we shot it. It was perfectly imperfect. And I think that was one of the special things about it, was that it wasn't glossy, and everything online and everything in wellness at that time was glossy, and we weren't. We were a lot more relatable, and that's just, I think, been one of our, I suppose, secret sauces that we've had even to this day, which we're really, really proud of.
We need to take a minute to thank our sponsor of the podcast, OxyShred Energy, for having the best energy drink on the market. I love the way that it makes me feel. Throughout this conversation with Steph Claire Smith, I've been drinking on this can right now, the lemon and lime spritz. It's a brand new flavor and I absolutely love it. Highly recommend if you want to have a little bit of a boost in energy and have no jitters, no crash in whatever you're doing. If it's working out, training, you're going to be focusing, honing in on some work, or recording a podcast just like I have been, then OxyShred is for you. You can find these at any of your local 7-Eleven, Coles, Woolworths, Ampol, OTR, or go to the website in the link in the description or the show notes below to check them out for yourself. Let's get back to the episode with Steph Claire Smith. So you created the ebook when you were in New York?
It was when we came back.
Right.
So I'd come back home, we reconnected at home, and it was probably 6 or so months after that it went out.
So how was your relationship with, because obviously going through those times where you're saying you're getting measured twice a month or whatever you were saying.
Twice a week.
Twice a week.
Yeah.
You were getting measured, and, just constantly having this battle of comparison probably to other people on billboards and other people getting the jobs and then getting turned down, and just the ruthless cutthroat nature of the industry that you were in. How did you go creating recipes when you're in that frame of mind? Because and I'm just referring it back to people that I know and experienced with people that were close in my life, seeing how they look at food and all the rest of it. How did you create healthy recipes that weren't with the thought in mind of, okay, this is not going to get people in the same headspace that I'm in and going through in this industry? How did that look?
Well, first of all, we wanted to make sure that it was enjoyable, because one thing that we'd both learnt through the routes that we went down, moving our bodies became hell and not fun anymore. And we were both people who grew up loving sports, loving moving our bodies. So that was really weird to suddenly hate moving your body. But we dreaded it because we were doing it for the wrong reasons. So something enjoyable, and that includes your diet as well. If what you're following is no fun and you don't see yourself doing it for very long, then it's probably too restrictive in some way. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't have those feelings around it. And Laura particularly, she went down the full calorie counting route. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't about calories. And we basically just took it back to whole foods and making carbs not scary anymore, or sugar not scary anymore, and just making food that was delicious and enjoyable, and you could have it with your friends and family and they wouldn't think that you were just serving up this healthy thing that was going to taste like shit. It actually tasted amazing and made them feel good and full. And then from there we just became even more and more comfortable, because again, that was, yes, we'd grown enough to be able to create something like that. We couldn't have done that in our darkest moments when I was obviously believing a whole bunch of things were really toxic, but we were still at the start of our journey, and we were really authentic about that. And I think that's what has been almost so special about this community to me, is I've grown so much with them and their support and encouragement. I jump in almost every day and see the way that they are there for each other, and the way that they're there for us and that they've been there for us since the start has certainly helped us on this journey as well. We are so far from perfect, and we are not at a state where, you wake up every day and love what you see, or don't have any food noise whatsoever, or, don't feel guilty for a second if you haven't worked out in a week or whatever. Those things can still come up. But that it's just so much quicker now for us to squash, because of what we've been through and what we've seen and how much we've grown. And that journey for me is so special. To have done that alongside the business has just been amazing.
Was there a time in New York where Was there like a time that you can remember vividly where you were looking in the mirror and you're like, I can't keep doing this. This shit needs to change. And was there a catalyst for the change for you?
Yeah, it was actually, I was in a class with about 3 Victoria's Secret angels. It was a workout class. And I was stunned when they walked in. Like I was like, oh my God, this is who I want to be. Hello. I couldn't believe that they were in the class. And I saw them picking apart themselves like that classic scene on Mean Girls, the movie. Picking apart their body in the mirror. And I was standing there like, these women are supposed to be like, I mean, they're absolutely put on a pedestal, but I've seen them as perfection. Like if they don't even like what they see, what the hell am I never going to like what I see? And that was really eye-opening to me because it kind of made me realize that no matter what you look like, you're going to have insecurities at times. Unfortunately, external factors are going to affect things like that. And that for me was like, okay, I'm not happy. I'm not getting any happier the smaller I'm getting. I don't see any issue with them, but they're obviously still not happy with themselves. Like what am I trying to chase here? Like what am I actually chasing? I was so much happier at home when I didn't feel the need to change. So that was probably the biggest catalyst, I suppose, or moment from my memory. And then it was also, connecting with people close to me and at home and my agent at home who made me realize that it didn't necessarily have to be that way. That I was like, yeah, cool, because I'm done.
And seeing those 3 Victoria's Secret models just do that, was that scary? Did that like scare you?
Yeah. And even the trainer that I was training with, he had trained a lot of them. And he was really open and even more so started to be even more open when I was asking more and more questions about like the prep that they would do for certain shows or just to be the way that they are. And I was kind of like, what? Like I was just blown away because I think also my patterns with food, whilst they were restrictive or, I demonized certain food groups or whatever, or obsessed or thought about my lunch and dinner and snacks and everything ahead of time, like it was just what consumed me. I wasn't the type to starve myself. I loved food too much to starve myself. But a lot of what was kind of coming up was like, that was like the next kind of step. Like, okay, you've obsessed enough. You've obsessed to the point where now most days you're ending at binging, feeling really shit about yourself and, quite often purging. The next kind of step to then, do even more is to just like not eat or to find things that suppress that hunger. And I just like wasn't interested in that. But unfortunately, so many girls do feel the need to do it.
Yeah, I experienced it firsthand with my ex-girlfriend, and just like for me, it's so hard to see. Like there's one moment that like I vividly just remember that like just rocked me so much. I just remember like she was looking in the mirror, and she looked probably the most gorgeous I've ever seen her look in my whole life. Her body was probably the best looking I've ever seen it for the whole time we were together. And I remember she was about to go to London or whatever, and she got her measurements done, and they came back and said, hey, we're not going to send those measurements to London. You go in 2 weeks. We'll take your measurements the day before you leave, and we'll send those measurements. And just in the next couple of weeks, if you can just stop training, your bum's too big.
Yeah,
you can stop training and you can only do walks and then just watch what you're eating. And I just look at it and go, and she's looking in the mirror, literally out of the shower, looking at her body. And she asked me, she's like, do I look okay? And she actually said that to me. And I'm just looking in my head going, you are the most gorgeous I've ever seen you. And then that's when it just ticked in me where I went, it's so crazy the mind games that play on us. And I put myself in the shoes and I go, okay, so if success in my line of work is being skinny, because I know when I'm 4 kilos lighter, I get all the billboards and I get all the main campaigns and I get all of this. And I know that that's what success looks like. But then to do that, I have to stop eating as much, which I love doing, and I have to stop training, which is the one thing that gets me excited and energized on my time off. I stop doing both of that. And then I also feel bad about doing anything else. And I just go like, but then if I don't do it, then I won't get booked and then I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And like living in this loop. And then you get a campaign shoot and you're on a billboard for 6 months, but you're looking at yourself on that billboard every day or on the bus every day and you're 4 kilos lighter in that photo of yourself, so you feel shit about yourself right now. And it's just a constant thing. And I just go, like, the shit that they have to go through, like, yes, you make a lot of money and people look at it and go, you're just lucky that you're good looking.
Yeah.
And I just look at it and just go, honestly, they're not getting paid enough.
It's it is brutal, and I think it's definitely changed. Like, don't get me wrong, the industry has progressed, but it has a shitload more growth to do. Like, it's the fact that it is still kind of what you've got your plus size models and non. It just, there shouldn't be any definition. It should just be like everyone, every brand, most brands should kind of, especially if they think about the people that are walking through the stores, they should have that variety of people like showcasing their clothes, right? It is so far from realistic still, which is definitely still upsetting. And I think when I hear these stories from people that I know who are young and they're still in the industry now, it does frustrate me because there was a part of me that thought, you know, surely this isn't happening anymore. But I think what's like really sad and what was the eye-opening moment for me is like the industry has no care for your health. Like, for example, the advice that she got, very similar to the advice I got. There was even more hardcore advice that I got that was incredibly unhealthy, the suggestions that they made. And it was, again, got nothing to do with my health or my well-being. It was just to get to a certain measurement, which is just absolutely barbaric. And I think until the industry can be more inclusive, unfortunately, those like pressures are going to exist for a lot of women in the industry. And it sucks because for me, it's like I reflect on the modeling industry and I don't necessarily have a shitload of bad blood with my experience, like my personal experience, especially for most of my time in Australia. There's a lot of really positive stories that I can reflect on and incredible times, incredible friendships, great connections, great learnings. I learned so much of what I know about marketing and like product selling, all that sort of stuff through my modeling and through working with incredible brands and stuff and seeing what they were doing and how it all happens behind the scenes and then comes to life. Like being a part of that was so inspiring to me. So it's hard because I reflect back and I'm like, yeah, there's some things I really friggin' hate about the industry. But do I think it still has like a place? Like, sure, it just needs to grow. It just needs to be more inclusive.
I think it's still amazing. Like you look at it and go, there's so many great things. There's just also so many you said it's progressed a bit, but introducing
not enough
plus size modeling doesn't actually disregard any of the problems that they had before.
Certainly doesn't.
Because all of the people that are not in the plus size category, which is most people.
Yep. Everyone in between.
It's going like, okay, and this is, I just strip it back to when I look at, again, say her in the mirror or a person that's drop dead gorgeous, right?
Yeah.
Just because they're not looking anorexic or extremely skinny, they're not going to get booked.
I know.
Then I just look at that, and so it is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I also look at it and go, professional athletes devote their life and make sacrifices to be what they are doing.
Yeah.
This is a line of work. It's a cost to doing business. Are you going to play or not? And unfortunately, there is a lot of costs, and I don't like when things are jeopardizing health. But at the same time, it's still how it is, and hopefully it does progress a little bit. Yeah,
and I think it's interesting that you brought that up because I think I've also, been kind of posed the question before if, if I'm to have a daughter, like would I mean, it shouldn't really matter whether it was even Harvey, my son, like if he wanted to get into it or whatever. But unfortunately, I think the rates of, body image issues and eating disorders and stuff in women are far higher. So maybe that's why they always say if you have a daughter. But would I let her get into the modeling industry if she really wanted to do that? And I actually think I would, but I would educate her so much more on what I know and what I've learnt and try and support her so much more than the support that I got. And that's not to say that anything that I went through could have been saved by my parents, because there's no way that they could have related in any shape. My mum was not a model. But I just think that the experiences that I got, the opportunities that I got, the growth that I had, there's still so much that I think is still so good, that I would just hope that if you could go in understanding some of the really shitty parts about it, go in with maybe a thicker skin, or understanding what health matters, does that matter to you, and like what that looks like, kind of being set with all of that stuff and not necessarily have it being the be all and end all like it was for me, I think would help a lot with a lot of those situations, because it would mean that you weren't so, I hate to use the word desperate, but I was certainly desperate when I was living in New York, for sure, to just like make it work and just do anything to do that, because you'd understand in the bigger picture that there's so much more to life and to that experience.
What do you think some of the main lesson points you would teach your daughter going into it? What would they look like, do you think?
I think it would be, okay, so one piece of advice that people tried to give me when I first started modelling, and I felt like they were coming from a place of, it's not going to work out for you, so just make sure you have a backup plan and another route. But maybe some of them were actually coming from the place that I'm about to come from, is I would say it's important to have something else going on, whether that's studying or, you know, a job or whatever it is outside. The problem with full-time, like all your time going into modelling, is when you're not working, you're obsessing over what you look like. Like that's all that matters, really. And so because it was all that I was doing, that was just all consuming. The second I had kick to focus on outside of modelling, it was like I was super excited if I got a job, or like, yeah, stoked with that sort of stuff, and still had fun on set. But the quieter weeks didn't bother me so much because I was doing other things and I was helping other people, and I found this other passion of mine. So I wouldn't say it in the way of like you need a backup, because it doesn't work for most people. Like for most people, they can't have a long career in modelling. That's just realistic. I wouldn't say it from that energy. It would be more so for your mental health. It is so important to have something outside of the way that you look as a purpose, or something that's driving you outside of that. So that would be like the main thing. And then other than that, I would just kind of I'd teach them about health. I'd try and empower them that like the way their body feels and their energy and everything is so much more important than like a certain measurement or like fitting into a certain thing. And again, I really hope that by the time, if I were to have a girl and she was to get into the modeling industry, that it's changed by then. If it hasn't, that's really fucking pathetic. Like there's just, yeah, there's still so much to do and go, but I would hope that it was less about perfectionism by then, which shouldn't even exist, because that is in the eyes of the beholder, and more so about just reflecting what people actually look like.
It's powerful. The first one there, I think, is massive. Having something to strive towards outside of it, so your identity doesn't get tied to that thing. Because you might get booked all week and you'll make 10, 20, 30 grand in the week. Yeah. And then you don't get booked next week and you think it's over.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same for athletes. I've spoken to Harry Garside about this, but it's the same thing for athletes. A lot of them get so kind of stuck and fixated on a certain goal, whether that's like getting gold in the Olympics or whatever it is. Even if they reach it, it's then, or if they never reach it, that's one problem for them. If they do reach it, it's kind of like, okay, what next? The athletes that have, you know, the best kind of mental health and longevity in their careers are generally the ones that are also doing something outside of it. And yes, when you're putting your all into something, which a lot of athletes do, it can be really hard to find the time and energy to do that. It's not an easy thing to do. But if you think about like, oh, well, do I like helping people? Do I like teaching kids about things, or whatever it is outside of the actual sport itself? They're finding fulfillment in other things. So if they don't win the match, or if they don't get to that goal, they've still found joy in their life outside of it, or fulfillment outside of it, and can understand that if it doesn't actually end up working, there is other things to life. Whereas when it's all you care about, it's really hard to see that and really hard to kind of accept defeat.
I think it's a hard thing to think about though, because obviously the reason they are so great is because they've gone all in.
So much.
And you know, it's a real thing with athletes where they get dropped or they get medically retired or whatever it might be, and they lose their identity, sense of purpose because they tied it to that sport. But then it's a double-edged sword, because if you didn't tie yourself to the sport, would have you given it everything you did which got you in that position in the first place? It's a constant battle.
Yeah.
The backup plan's an interesting thing, because I just don't know. Sometimes when you have a plan B, you don't give everything to plan A.
Yeah.
Whereas when your back's against the wall and plan A is the only option, you seem to give it a bit more oomph. But at the same time, like, having that's always, it is always handy from a mental health standpoint, because I believe just, you know, not being able to, if you can go all in on something but then not tie yourself to that thing and go like, this is like a chapter of the journey rather than just my whole life.
Yeah.
I think you can kind of overcome the failure or the period of time in which you need to move on from that thing a lot easier. It just is a lot harder when you're just in the weeds trying to go all in on that thing, I guess. Yeah. I just look back on different things that I've done, and I know the greatness comes from going all in, but at the same time, you just need to navigate that. I want to talk about kick a bit more.
Yeah.
And like a crazy stat is the Forbes 30 under 30. Like when that happened to you, how quick was that journey from starting kick to achieving that? And how did you feel when you got that little milestone? We will get back to the episode in just 1 minute, but I need to thank our sponsors of the podcast, Switch Nutrition. More specifically, I want to talk about these 3 products that are in my hand right now and foundational health. There is so many different supplements online, different people telling you all these different things to do, but I love to strip it right back to the foundations and what are the things we need to be doing every single day to take care of that foundational health. I take these 3 products every single day without fail. Hydrate in the morning to keep me hydrated and energized for the day. The adrenal just before bed so I can sleep like a baby, and then the collagen I have in my yogurt bowls every single day. It's good to hit that protein goal, but then also your hair, skin, joints, nails. It's a game changer. So if you want to try out any of these products, you can go to the link in the description or the show notes below, and that is my collections page where you can find all the products that I love and take every single day. Alternatively, you can go to switchnutrition.com.au and use the code Griffin and you'll get 20% off your entire order. Once again, hit the link in the show notes or the description below, or go to switchnutrition.com.au to get 20% off your entire order if you use code Chris Griffin. I'm going to shut up. Let's get back to the episode.
We launched the app in 2018, but the ebook was back in 2015. So the community started growing back then. But yeah, I think the recent kind of recognition in 30 under 30 is very surreal for me. Mainly because when I used to picture myself in magazines, it certainly wasn't in Forbes. So that's like just one thing that's really wild. But I think for me, the one important thing when it was acknowledged was, you know, it was hard for me to accept for me on my own, because there's no way kick would be where it is or where I would be as an individual without my co-founder, Laura. And so for me, it was really hard to accept in ways, because I was like, should be Laura up there, or at least like have us together. So that was really hard. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, it meant that kick got the acknowledgement it deserves, which is really important as well. And, you know, I definitely accepted it on the behalf of the both of us, because it is certainly something that there is no way in hell I would have been able to do alone. And that's for a number of reasons. But it is an incredibly proud and surreal moment, that's for sure.
So because if we tie back to what you said at the start of the conversation, where there's some rooms where you feel out of place.
Yeah.
Is that one of those rooms when you're at a Forbes event, 30 under 30? Like, is that something where you feel out of place? Or when you're referring to that early in the convo, what were you meaning?
I'm getting better at it. So if it had happened a couple of years ago, certainly I wouldn't have even been able to like talk to some of the other entrepreneurs, because I would have just been like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. I think I've gotten better at realizing that entrepreneurs, particularly like founders, they come with all different kinds of backgrounds and knowledge and expertise. I had this real perception that most other people who were running businesses, you know, weren't necessarily the creatives. They were the the academic kind that can clearly read a P&L and like forecast this and that, and like we're obsessed with data, et cetera, because a lot of the rooms that I had been in with really successful women, for example, they were the kind of conversations that were going on, and I was like, I have nothing to add. I'm so lost. And I think it took it took meeting a couple of kind of other entrepreneurs or co-founders that I related to a lot more in, I suppose, where they'd been and the experience that they'd had before they ran their own business, and their knowledge and stuff like that, and also just what they gravitated towards being more creative, and realized that like, oh, actually there's not just one way to be a founder. And again, it's not just Laura that I couldn't have done this without. It's been the team over the years that's grown and is insane to me. Even still, when we interview people for like new roles and stuff, it's still so surreal. Like I remember going for jobs, and then now I'm like this person in this process that's like reading someone's resume and meeting them to see if they kind of meet the criteria and the, I suppose, charisma of like our office and connects with it's just so weird to me. I'm like, why do you want to work for us? But then I step back and I'm like, the business is insane what we've been able to do and what we do for people, and I actually do get it. I get why people want to be a part of it, and that's really cool. That's really, like, I'm really proud of that. But to your question, yeah, it can be those rooms of really successful people that I do have that voice inside that's like, oh, this is just all because of luck. Like you got here just because of luck. And you don't know what you're doing. That's still there a little bit. But I'm just better at making sure it's at the very back of my mind and not taking over.
I guess it's just that imposter syndrome feeling that I heard someone say, if you're not feeling like an imposter every 18 months, you're not growing enough. And it's an interesting thing because feeling like that is a really good thing because it's a new environment that's in this next level in terms of business, and you kind of go, fuck, what am I doing here? Sort of thing. And so it's a weird feeling, but then obviously the more you go, the more it becomes normal and it gets better. I feel like you wouldn't have been in that room if you didn't transfer from just ebooks to the app. How did you get inspired to take it to the next level from a business standpoint, going from PDFs and whatever you were doing there and then actually building out software and an app? And was there someone that inspired you to do that, or how did you get exposed to do that?
So we both, like from the get-go, wanted to make because as I already touched on, kind of the space online, particularly with what the information that was out there, we wanted to make sure that that kind of base, that middle ground of health and wellness was much more accessible for people. And outside of the ebook, which once you kind of create it, it's kind of done unless you want to do more of them. We wanted to be able to talk to our community more. So we did a subscription blog, which had like a couple of workouts and recipes each month, which we started to get subscribers to. And then we worked with another company for about 9 months. And they basically had this white label product, which was kind of structured a program for you, and they would like insert talent and spit out this kind of content. And we worked with them for a period of time. They were a massive company, lots and lots of people involved. But it was through that experience that we realized we love producing this content. We love being able to do more for our community. But we also want to have more control over like different aspects of the business. We want to know what the marketing team are thinking about going out with. We want to understand where the business is like putting its money or like next steps. Also, it wasn't an app. It was a website. Apps just make things so much more accessible. And then when it comes to like health, especially tech, there's just so much more you can do with an app that you can't do with a website. So it was just for us this is just what we got to do. And when we did, talk about doing that and going off on our own, just because of contractual reasons, it meant that we lost all content, had to start from scratch, new name, lost everything, lost all customer data, so all of their subscriber data, etc. We didn't have anymore, but we still had our Instagram, which was what we'd owned from the start. And we still decided that it was the right decision to go and take that risk and do it on our own. And it was the scariest jump that we've ever done, but we both, I think we just knew that it just felt right in our gut. And I think that's been the biggest lesson is over the journey, when we've lent more into our gut, things have worked out. And when we've ignored our gut instinct, that's when we've needed to go back and fix things. So that's kind of always been my biggest piece of advice to people. Even if you do feel like an imposter and you don't feel like you know what you're doing, your gut, particularly when it's your business that you've built and your community that you know inside and out, it's generally right. So that was one of those times where we trusted our gut over looking at, how much things might cost us or how hard it might be to find a team to do things or execute things in certain ways, or how hard it is to keep subscribers and all of that sort of stuff. We kind of didn't. Laura definitely did a bit of a financial plan, absolutely. But yeah, outside of that, it was definitely gut feel. And I think when it comes to the actual tech and like building of the app, we worked with another company. So we had a family friend connection through Laura with a games developing company, and they had also built some apps before. And we went into a partnership, like a rev share partnership with them, which meant that from the get-go we could have access to this already working, functional, awesome team, and learnt a lot about like what is possible, what's not necessarily possible, how quick things can get done, like how slow things are, but how much work it is. And they made it very obvious to us that the app that we wanted to create, if we went elsewhere and just kind of like paid someone to do it, it would have cost us like $1 million, which we did not have. So it was the right decision for us. And we worked with them for a couple of years before we then hired our own in-house tech team, which was, again, another journey in itself, because with two founders with no background in tech, that was really interesting. Trying to find, a lead that we felt like connected with both our values and what we wanted to do, but also understood engineering and everything, and could tell us what the team looked like and who we would need and stuff. Like, that's been a journey, but where we are now is awesome. And I think what's really beautiful and the feedback that we get from a lot of the developers that join our team is that in so many of their jobs, they're never so connected with the people that they're actually helping. Like, if they get a bug, someone can't access a workout, or they lose their data from a run or whatever, they're not used to getting that kind of instant feedback and then being able to fix it for them, and then this email of, my God, thank you so much. Like, they just didn't have that. They were so detached from these thousands and thousands and thousands of numbers that they might have been working on in some other company. So I think it's really beautiful to see them realize that no matter what minor change or big change that they make in our product, how much it's truly impacting someone's day is like really rewarding. So that's been really special.
It's crazy how quick you think things can happen, and then how long they actually take. Yeah. Like, I've had 2 software startups, both have failed. And again, having a dev team and having someone to build the product, and they say it's going to take 1 month, but it really doesn't. No. And then all the rest of the things. But it's really cool. I think what's fascinating is my audience on the podcast is 65% women. Yeah. And I get a lot of messages about starting business, and I think there's a lot more youthful women that are wanting to be entrepreneurs and create their own sort of life, which is cool and it's awesome. And I think my belief in it is the thing that's the most awesome about it is hopefully it gives them this ability to instill some passion into them, excitement. I think when you can build something cool and you're really passionate about it, everything else in your life can thrive a lot more because you've got this passion, excitement, conviction about you. And I think it's a really attractive trait, and I love that. And so I get messages all the time about people with different ideas, or they're a bit lost and they want to start, and they go like, where do I start? And I'm sure you've got people in your community that say the same thing. Is there advice for people that you give them when they're trying to start out in business as a young woman trying to give something a go? Yeah. Is there anything you tell them?
Well, I mean, it really depends on what that thing is and what their position is, both financially and, how much time they have on their hands, is what I would say first of all. But without knowing any of that, I think the one thing that holds people back, particularly women, if you look at the stats, is like perfection. It doesn't need to exist to start something. You don't feel like you need to know everything, or that something needs to be absolutely perfect before it launches. As I said earlier, our ebook was far from perfect. But it was still well received. And along the way, we've had to be really authentic about when things haven't gone live on time or there's been tech failures or whatever. And they've really responded well to, I think, that authentic journey and like knowing that things don't always work out, etc. So I think go into it knowing it is hard, do it for reasons outside of money, because for most people it's years and years before you actually make any money from it anyway. If you have someone in your life that you think would be a really good partner, doesn't have to be even or whatever, like that's each their own. But I know I couldn't have done business without a co-founder. Yes, it's all I can relate to, but it's also, for me, it's meant that in the really tough times there's been someone else there. And it's meant that we can both have ideas and kind of go off each other and learn from each other. And I think it would have felt like a lot more isolating, the journey, if I didn't have Laura. So that's something I would say to consider. And yeah, just, I don't know, just do what you can to start and to just seeding it out even before things are perfect or before you feel like you've got everything sorted and ready. You can kind of dip your toe in. I think that's okay. I think people think you've got to put all your eggs in that basket, like quit your job and like just do it all. Otherwise it's, you know, kind of to your point earlier, like if you're not all in, it's not going to work out. I think when you're first starting out, it doesn't have to be that way.
Definitely. Just start, such a powerful message. I want to change the topic a little bit. And I want to talk about family, children, all the fun stuff. Firstly, I want to read you something. So you posted this photo. This is the one. And it was cool. It was talking about motherhood and the challenges that you might have had. And I want to read the last little half of the thing that you wrote. You said, "The juggle is real, but movement is important to me. It's a big part of what makes me tick. And although my routine looks nothing like it once did, it's what works for me now. It's what's sustainable, and it still brings me so much joy. Regardless of actually spending less time working out each week than I used to, I'm feeling stronger than ever. New mamas, if you feel like you can't recognize yourself right now, not because of physical change, but because of the shift in your routine and how much harder it is to prioritize yourself, just know that you will find a way. It does get easier to make time. Just try not to compare what once was possible. Roll out the mat when you can, release the expectations of what it will look like, and just do what you can." How was having Harvey a few years ago now and falling into motherhood, and how's it been for you?
First of all, it's a dream come true. I always wanted to be a mum. And he was very much planned and everything. So I was just over the moon. Is it way harder than I anticipated? Yeah, but I think that's just because nothing can really prepare you other than the experience itself. However, I am so much more capable, patient, strong, everything. I feel like I've just expanded as a person since having him. So it's harder, but I'm a different person now, and I just am naturally more prepared to take it on. When it comes to the juggle, that's still something that is constantly challenging, I think, particularly if you're working as well. But any parent would be able to relate to that. And I think it's this pull between two passions for me, which is what I struggle with the most. I still have so much drive, love, and everything for Kick, and I still have so many exciting ideas that I want to do and be there for the community just as much as I've always wanted to be. But at the same time, I'm now sharing that passion with like a real life human baby. You know, Kick used to be my baby. So that's a constant struggle in like trying to find the right split that fills my cup and, you know, ensures that I'm still showing up as a good business partner, a great leader, and but also a really good mum. I haven't worked, there's no magic in that. It's like you just have to kind of find what works for you. And there's certain changes that I've made and in my role and everything that have absolutely helped more recently in filling my cup and making sure that I'm still super energized in both camps. But that's not always available to everyone. You know, I'm fortunate enough to run my own business, but also do it with my best friend and have a business partner that's very supportive in that sort of thing. Whereas if you're kind of working for someone, you can't choose what that looks like. It's like you either want the job or you don't. So I definitely want to acknowledge that I'm fortunate in that, but that's something that's been really hard. And I think the whole thing with movement for me, it's helped me so much in understanding and respecting my body, not just through birth and pregnancy, because that's so fascinating and like wild to me how magical it all is, but just in that caption particularly about like comparing my old routine before having Harvey to now, it's just, unless I want to have no time with him, it's not going to happen. I would have to sacrifice more time with him for my routine to look like it used to. And that's just not something that I want to do, and that's okay. And I think where I used to feel like, oh, I need to do this, otherwise I won't feel energized or I won't feel like myself, I've realized that doesn't actually need to look that way, and it can look very different. But that's been through like a couple of years of rolling out the mat and just doing the little things, and them still making me feel good, and that there's other things in life that also make me feel good as well.
So was that really hard at the start, trying to navigate that change in routine? Like just having to, what once was so good and you probably deemed it as quite a healthy routine, so it was quite a good thing to be doing for your body, and then having to change it quite dramatically, was that quite hard mentally, just having to go through that change?
Yeah, and it's like almost anyone who's gone through injury as well, like even after postpartum and like easing back into it, feeling like weak as, and like, oh my God, I used to be so much stronger, or like would have stamina for so much longer. Like this is so different now. Like that was kind of hard. But at least you know that some of that's going to come back. I think it was more so after a year of training and getting my strength back, I felt really, really strong. But it was, yeah, as you said, like it just wasn't that routine. It wasn't that amount of times per week, or it wasn't that amount of minutes per week or whatever that I used to think mattered. And for me now, I think particularly when you're running around after a toddler and doing so much incidental exercise anyway, because movement is important to me, it doesn't always have to be on the mat. And that's been really nice to kind of come to that realization. But at the same time, my biggest message to mums is to still roll out the mat at times and make time for yourself, because it is still super important, and it doesn't have to be for your physical self. I think for your mental health, more importantly, to have that time to yourself, that you're doing something for you. And if you want to look at it in a non-selfish way, it's like if your kid's sitting next to you watching you do that, then they're only going to see that as like growing up, they're going to be like, okay, well, it makes sense to make time for moving your body, or like my mum looked after herself or whatever. Like they can't be a bad thing. So if you need a reason outside of yourself to do it.
But being selfish is important at times.
100%. 100%.
Do you struggle to be selfish?
I think a lot of mums do.
Yeah.
I think it's like, someone explained to me recently, and I can't remember how they did, so I'm not going to even try. But selfish, I think, has such a negative connotation to it. And I think it's because if you look at the true definition of selfish, it is almost like doing things and like not necessarily worrying about anyone else. And that's not always okay. Like, you know, obviously we've got to be conscious of others. But I think putting yourself first, or doing things for you, or leaning into what you actually want, that needs to stop being demonized. And I think I'm finally there. I'm at this point where I'm kind of leaning back into my younger self, who did do that and who was very confident in like doing what felt right for me, not caring about other people's judgment, not how it's going to affect them. That's still something to be conscious of. But the judgment of others, that's something that I'm proud that I'm kind of getting back to that point where what I want and need for myself is really important, and prioritizing it is important.
Yeah, I think it's just understanding that you can't pour from an empty cup. Hey,
No.
It's like being selfish in order so you can be selfless.
Yeah.
And you've got another one on the way.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How do you feel?
I think, I'm so excited. Like, again, it was planned and everything. So feel so fortunate to be going through it again. But I think in one way, it's like we've just gone through toilet training. He's out of nappies. He's sleeping through the night. And I'm about to go through it all again. But I am really, really excited about it. I think going into it, you know, after doing it once before, I think I'll have a lot less anxiety over what we should be doing, if I'm doing something right, if this phase feels like it's never ending, like when are they going to sleep, or like am I breastfeeding right? All of these questions that I think as new mums, unfortunately, we feel so unguided and unsupported, and that we're almost overwhelmed with the amount of information that we have online. So many mixed opinions online, so many different mums doing different things online. It can be really hard to decide what feels right for you and your family. But I think because we've done it before, I'm hoping, and I'm already feeling this way even with my pregnancy and how relaxed I've felt, that I will be able to go into this a lot less anxious and kind of just, understand that my gut feel is right, again, just like business, and that it all works out, and that the phases that feel never ending actually do end. And one day you'll look back and be like, oh, it's kind of cute when they needed me so much. They'll be pouring their own cereal and getting themselves dressed and everything, and you'll be like, when the heck did this happen? So I'm really, really excited. Very, very happy.
It's very cool. It's just cool to see. And how important has Josh been, your partner, in this whole process as well, and having him there? Yeah,
very, very important. So Josh has been a massive part of my life for quite a long time. We met 18 years ago now, and have been dating for 13. He is a stay-at-home dad, which I wouldn't be able to do what I do with Kick, and I think pour as much as I can into Kick if that wasn't the case. I truly believe, and that's just me. Everyone's different. But for me, having his support has meant the world. And he's just, outside of physically being there, he's just so excited and proud of me all the time, and keeps me really kind of driven on a lot of things. And I don't know, he's my biggest cheerleader and support. So there's a lot of times when I've been really struggling, that I wouldn't have probably been able to get through if I didn't have him. So he's everything to me.
When was the decision to have that dynamic of like stay-at-home dad? Because obviously it's not like you don't hear it commonly.
No, it's definitely not the norm still.
And so like when you guys were having that discussion, like how did that all work?
Yeah. Well, so we were both part of another company before Harvey was born, and we exited that company shortly after Harvey was born, but we were going to, like, the plans were even before Harvey came along. So I think in knowing that, and that was Josh's like kind of main priority of work, knowing that was going to be gone, he just automatically had more time on his hands. And we did have, I think, a couple of conversations about it. It was more so just kind of, it felt like a bit of a given. Like, he knew what we were doing with Kick, and he knew where we were at with Kick and how much growth was ahead of us, and knew that my heart and everything was still absolutely in there. So I think it was without question that I was obviously still going to be working on the business. But for him, I think it was this opportunity to be really present with his kid. I mean, he's got a close relationship with his dad, who's an incredibly successful businessman. But the one thing that I think he does reflect on is that he wasn't necessarily always there. Like, he was working a lot. And so I think for Josh, he wanted to be a really present dad, and he wanted to support me in that way. And so we just had a conversation and I kind of reminded him through the journey, if it ever doesn't feel right or like is too much, we can look at nanny, we can look at putting him in daycare. Like, I don't want you to think those options are off the cards or anything. If there's something that you're inspired to do or want to get back into work in some way. But he just really took it by the reins, and he's been doing an amazing job. And he does a lot on the side for us as well. And he also does a bit of content creation as well through it all. But he's just such an amazing partner and dad that it's just been the right dynamic for us.
It's so cool, like childhood sweetheart, 18 years, just absolutely wild. What has been a common theme throughout the whole conversation, which is really, really cool, is you've kind of challenged norms a little bit. Like, yeah, okay, that doesn't make sense. Well, let's just not do it. Or like, I want to do this, I'm just going to do this.
Yeah.
And, like, obviously even saying how your parents were supportive with you kind of just doing things that feels right at such an early age. You've gone through this. Okay, I'm going to go home after being in New York. It feels right. I was so much more happy that I'm just going to do it. Even though like typically you'd be there going, no, I need to make this work. Like this is what are people going to think and all of this. And then naturally you're going to have those thoughts, but you still came back and moved back into Australia, and then going against the norm with obviously with what Josh is doing and just being so open to everything and trialing things. It's been a really cool common denominator of all the things I've been hearing today, which has been sick.
I think, so I'm almost 31, and I think the kind of the things that I've realized about myself over the last couple of years that have made me really proud is, I think that's what's helped with that is how self-aware I am and how self-aware I've always been, even when I've felt lost, like when I was living in New York or, in my later 20s where I, after Harvey, I started to kind of tip more into that bucket of like, what do people need from me? Like less of like what I actually want and what can I do for other people, because it's almost like I felt guilty in a way, and no one made me feel this way, but it's like, I'd done something outside of my business, and that was quite selfish of me. So like, what can I do that's going to like prove that I'm, I don't know, still in this or whatever, rather than really just kind of leaning into the truth. And so for me, I think the last couple of years it's been, reflecting and actually being very proud of the fact that even when I was lost or not necessarily being my most authentic self, I was actually really aware of it. Like I was really aware in New York that what I was doing didn't feel like me. I was really aware that I wasn't going to be able to sustain it for very long. It was very conscious stuff, and deciding to go home or deciding to, not continue to be that way, I think was just because this whole time I've been very much encouraged to listen to who I truly am. It sounds so corny. But I think that's something I'm really proud of.
I guess you do it and it feels right and it works out.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that gives you a little bit of confidence to do that again and
Yeah.
do things for you. If we fast forward to now, you've obviously spoken a lot about your journey and all the amazing things. If we fast forward to now and obviously just having a new baby on the way and all navigating business and family and all the rest of it, what would you say your biggest challenge would be in life right now?
I mean, it's still that constant juggle. But I think I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and it's been in some ways a relief, and it's helped me kind of reflect back on things and made a lot of sense of things for me. But at the same time, it's a journey in itself, like learning more about it and trying to find different tools and stuff that can help me. So that's kind of something that's challenging me at the moment, because I suppose I'm a little bit more hyper aware of it, and particularly in some of my behavioral traits and stuff like that, like at home, I'm kind of, 1 minute super happy and nothing's bothering me. The next, it's like over spilt milk. I'm like a toddler having a tantrum on the floor. So different things like that, understanding that a little bit more has been good, but also it's almost like I'm in this like mourning process of, if I'd known this earlier, could I have had tools that over the last like 5 years that have been quite challenging would have helped me through a lot of my challenges. That would have been great, but it didn't. So let's not like focus too much on the past and just think about the future. But I would say over that, it's just the juggle. And I just don't know if that will ever not feel like a challenge. But it's somewhat getting easier the more I'm understanding how to fill up my own cup, which in turn means that I'm there for both my son, my family, my friends, showing up for my health and my business and my business partner.
And then you have another baby and then there's another challenge.
Sharing that, exactly.
Do you think getting diagnosed with ADHD overall, do you think it's a net positive that you're aware of it or not aware, or do you think it's just added more stress into your life by being conscious of the fact of that?
Yeah. I think right now it's a bit stressful just because I'm like very conscious of it and I'm trying to like learn more about it. But I absolutely think it was a positive. Absolutely. Like I was this huge sense of relief, and also it's meant that looking forward, I understand myself so much more, and I understand with the things that I find more challenging. Like I think I'll be less hard on myself for that, rather than being like, what's wrong with you? Everyone else seems to be able to do this. Like you're dumb, you're lazy, you're like this or that. These labels that I've kind of gone to, I know already that I'm less likely to jump to those kind of conclusions, and I understand a lot more now that it's like, well, things are actually more challenging. There is more hurdles for me for certain things. So let's work through that. I think it'll feel a lot lighter going forward.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it. I just want to commend you. Everything that you're doing is so awesome. It's inspiring. And so many people message me asking to have you on the show. So hopefully people really enjoy the conversation.
Hopefully.
And yeah, where can they find you? I'll leave all the stuff in the show notes in the description below. But
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm Steph Claire Smith, and Kick is kick.app.
Go and join Kick.
Yeah. So you know what? We'll give you a free month.
Go on then.
We'll pop it in the show notes.
Pop it in the show notes. Go and join Kick. Give it a try. It is awesome.
Thank you.
I actually was in preparation of speaking to a couple of people, and they're like, oh yeah, I've got the app.
Oh, great.
Which is cool.
Great.
So thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate your time. And if you guys have made it to the end, how awesome, Steph.
Oh.
She's great. Leave a
Thanks for still being
5-star
here.
review on Spotify or Apple. It helps the show grow, and it helps us keep getting amazing guests just like Steph back on the show so we can keep growing together. I'm going to sign out for this week, but I will see you next week.